from their own families. And living and growing up and working in the United States, having that family history, that gives us a powerful sense of solidarity when we see this happening anywhere else in the world. I grew up learning about the Holocaust in school, and I felt a powerful sense of solidarity with millions of Jewish people and others who were killed and who survived this atrocity and who said never again. And I felt that very deeply from my own family's history, that never again has to mean never again for any people. So learning over the course of my life about what's happening in Palestine with US support was appalling. And I learned, like so many Muslims and Arabs and Palestinians growing up here, that you can't talk about it without being silenced or persecuted or just told that you can't do that if you want to get ahead. And that moment is over. Millions of people in the United States can't tolerate this anymore. After the past few weeks with that we've been protesting and marching and rallying on the streets, this pause is finally happening for 4 days, and it shows what was possible many weeks ago. Many thousands of lives could have been saved. Instead, Israel has killed more than 14,000 people in Gaza in the last 7 weeks, and Netanyahu has made clear that he intends to escalate after this 4-day cessation and the trading of hostages. Now is a moment to make clear that the United States cannot allow a return to the indiscriminate killing of Palestinians who are facing mass killing and starvation. The absence of a permanent ceasefire and continued military funding for Israel means more blood on President Biden's hands. And we can't tolerate this anymore. A pause of 4 days shows that a permanent ceasefire is possible, and so much more is possible beyond that with a lasting political solution. Another whole world is possible where all people have the right to survive and thrive and be treated equally as the full people that they are. Thank you.
I have the privilege of representing Astoria in Northwest Queens in New York City, and one of the beacons of light in our community is a neighborhood called Little Egypt. And I am so proud to call up Rana Abdel Hamid, who is an organizer, a former congressional candidate, who has been organizing so many in the place that I call home, and who will be hunger striking with us throughout this week as she demands and we demand that President Biden call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rana Abdel Hamid, and I am an anti-violence organizer, self-defense instructor. I am from Little Egypt, born and raised in Queens, and I'm a child of Egyptian working-class immigrants. And I stand here today joining the hunger strike because I am appalled, I am heartbroken, I am devastated by the ongoing loss of life, ongoing loss of Palestinian life that we have witnessed over the past 7 weeks. Over 14,850 people have been murdered by the complicity, by the aid of the United States government, by our congressional members, by our president. And we stand with the majority of Americans in standing for a permanent ceasefire, and standing against the ongoing destruction, and standing for life, and standing for justice, and standing for ensuring that all communities are safe. As someone who has been organizing against violence across this country, hate-based violence across this country, I'm fully aware that the violence and the anti-Palestinian rhetoric that we're seeing abroad is also impacting us here in the United States. Those two things are inextricably linked. When our electeds and our politicians and our representatives are continuously dehumanizing Palestinian people, are normalizing Palestinian death, we get what we got 2 days ago. We get 3 Palestinian students in Vermont being shot at for simply wearing a keffiyeh, for simply speaking Arabic. 3 Palestinian students, one of whom goes to Brown University like my brother, one of whom shares my last name. I woke up yesterday to text messages, to a headline that had me feeling like my brother got shot, because it could have been. Over the past couple of weeks, we have seen an incredibly harmful uptick in violence impacting across all of our communities. When we normalize the deaths and murder of Palestinian people vis-a-vis our foreign policy, we normalize death and violence here in the United States across all of our communities. We need to understand that violence only allows for more violence. What we need is negotiation, what we need is diplomacy, what we need is human rights, and for all families to be able to be safe, to return safely, to not have to endure more bombing, more violence, and more destruction. And we need President Biden's moral leadership and courageous leadership in this moment. Thank you very much.
Now going to turn it to another hunger striker, Sumaya Awad, the Palestinian New Yorker, and has been a leader in organizing so many in this fight for a permanent ceasefire.
Thank you, Zohran. Today is the Monday after Thanksgiving, which usually means the White House, staffers, everybody's just come back to work. The idea is that we go back to life as usual. And we're here hunger striking to say there is no going back to life as usual. There is no going back to normal when our government is complicit in an unfolding genocide, when our government is supporting the mass murder of tens of thousands of Palestinians, of over 6,000 Palestinian children, when our government is complicit in fomenting violence in Palestine, in Gaza, but also here on US soil. The dehumanization, the smears of Palestinians and of those who organize for Palestinian freedom, those who organize for a ceasefire, those smears, that dehumanization, it's not just impacting Palestinians in Gaza, it's also impacting Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims in the US. And we saw that at several moments in the last 7 weeks. We saw that when a 6-year-old Palestinian boy in Chicago was stabbed to death by his landlord. We saw that when a Muslim woman in Texas was killed in front of her home. And we saw that this weekend in Burlington, Vermont, when 3 Palestinian college students were shot for wearing a Palestinian kufiya and speaking Arabic. This is what happens when we don't demand a permanent ceasefire. This is what happens when we continue to instigate violence, when our government continues to dehumanize Palestinians. And that's why I'm here today, with many of the people behind me who are on hunger strike. We're on hunger strike to say we want a permanent ceasefire. And we know that this is possible because we're on day 4 of a ceasefire right now, and one that's just been extended by another 2 days. So we know it's possible for this to become permanent. And we know that is the only way for this level of death and destruction to end. 45% of homes in Gaza have been destroyed. 45%. Imagine that in any US city. Over 15,000 Palestinians have already been killed. Nothing justifies this. Self-defense does not justify the murder of 15,000 Palestinians, the murder of over 6,000 Palestinian children, the targeting of hospitals and schools, the targeting of kindergartens and libraries. Nothing justifies this. And for Israel, anyone is a target. For Israel, journalists and doctors are targets. For Israel, children and NICU babies are viable targets. And Israel has made it clear what their intention is from the day 1, from 7 weeks ago, when they said they want to flatten Gaza. I'm Palestinian, and I'm a New Yorker, I'm an American, and I'm a mother of a 16-month-old. And I'm on hunger strike to illustrate to our government just a sliver, a fragment of what Palestinians are enduring in Gaza every single day. I'm on hunger strike to demand a permanent ceasefire and to say that we will continue to pressure our government in every way possible to get that permanent ceasefire, because we are not just silent observers, we are complicit in what is happening in Palestine. We are on hunger strike because what's happening in Gaza is not something far away across the sea that we have nothing to do with, that it has real impacts on our lives here in the US. And we're being shown this time and again, and I only hope that our president and our government wake up and call for this permanent ceasefire before even more lives are lost in Gaza and here as well.
These last few days have been filled with images of Israeli hostages and Palestinian political prisoners being reunited with their families. We are hunger striking for a world where everyone is with their family. And it is a world that can only be made possible through a ceasefire. It is not war that brought us these reunifications. It is negotiations. It is a cessation. And it is that must be extended so that we can ensure that every single person in Israel and in Palestine is living a life that is worth describing as such. We hunger strike not because we want to. We hunger strike because we have been forced to by this president and by our government's foreign policy. We hunger strike because Palestinians have been doubted in life and in death, that their experience has been erased, and to bring that experience right here to the doorstep of our president. To say that when Oxfam describes Israel as using starvation as a weapon of war, when the UN speaks about how since October 21st, only 7% of food to fulfill the minimum caloric intake for Palestinians has been permitted to enter Gaza. We say that this is unacceptable, that our president is effectively bombing Palestinians, starving Palestinians, and we can never say that it was done with our consent. We ask our president to reflect the sentiments not just of the people standing here, depriving themselves of food and a normal life for this week. We ask him to reflect the sentiments of Americans. 68% of Americans want a ceasefire. 80% of Democrats want a ceasefire. A majority of Republicans and independents want a ceasefire. We are appealing to a president who ran on the promise to restore America's moral standing in the world. We are asking you to follow the promise you told us. What moral standing can we have when our policies eliminate entire Palestinian families from population registers? We sit here to ask you to stand up, to ask you to follow your own rhetoric, to ask you to save lives. That is what we are demanding. That is why we are depriving ourselves. That is why so many Americans are calling on you for a permanent ceasefire now. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to every single person who has helped to put this together and who is hunger striking themselves to showcase the inhumanity of this moment. And thank you all for attending. We will open it up for any questions from the press before closing out this event. Please.
First, how did this come together? How was it organized? Second, there's a lot of stories coming out of the White House and Democrats that those calling for ceasefire are far left and a fringe within the party. How would you respond to that argument?
First, I would just say, if anyone alongside me wants to respond to any of this, please step up here as well. This was organized by a number of organizations. I'm proud to have played a small role in that. The organizations that have led on this are Jewish Voice for Peace, If Not Now, U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights, Adala Justice Project, Dream Defenders, as well as a number of others, and the Democratic Socialists of America. This is something that was organized because people are desperate in this country to see a government that reflects their sentiments. People have been organizing, protesting, marching at every opportunity they have. None of us want to be in Washington, D.C. for a week, depriving ourselves of food, depriving ourselves of any sense of normalcy. But this president has forced us to take drastic action to visibilize what he himself is doing to Palestinians. To your question about who supports the ceasefire, if you can hear me, yes. When 57% of Republicans are calling for a ceasefire, I don't know how this demand can be characterized as something that is far left. This is the most mainstream demand in America today on foreign policy. 8 out of 10 Democrats want a ceasefire. It is not easy to get 8 out of 10 Democrats to agree on a principle, but here we have one. And a president who ran on restoring America's moral standing is given an opportunity to do exactly that, and we are asking him that he take it. Is there anyone who'd like to? Please.
I just would like to add that in addition to it being a very mainstream opinion, what's also starting to become a mainstream opinion amongst Muslims and Arab Americans is they don't want to vote for Biden for re-election. And so in addition to it being a moral stance that I would say is a very easy one to take, it's also a politically expedient stance for him to take. And so I'm really disappointed. I know a lot of my constituents are also disappointed that he's not using this moment to bring us together, bring our country forward, and help his re-election campaign.
To illustrate Medina's point, 70% of voters between the age of 18 and 34 disapprove of President Biden's handling of this crisis. When we look out on the streets, when we look at the hunger strikers, we are looking at the base of the Democratic Party, asking a president to live up to the promise of the party that they are members of. Are there any other questions? Thank you so much for being here. We will be here at this very site from 9 in the morning until 7 in the evening every day through the end of this week. And we will be here calling on our president each of those days for a permanent ceasefire now. Thank you so much. We're just going to do a quick photo of everyone. There's also there's a press availability until 3 p.m. We will be here, and you know we'll be here until 7 as well, so we're asking until 3. Thank you. We're going to do a photo of everyone who's